All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Bryant from Earlham College, and I'll be the moderator for this lightning round session. We have 3 sessions today, so we're going to moving pretty quickly. But a couple of words before we start. We have a code of conduct that we'll adhere to for this conference. I'll be posting the link in the chat. If you experience any issues related to code of conduct, please contact us by the email that's available in the chat. Please, your microphones are muted during this presentation, but if you have any questions, we're going to be holding the questions until after all 3 sessions. But there is a Q&A feature built into Zoom. It's available at the bottom bar as you're looking at the Zoom interface. Feel free to use that to ask questions. You can use the chat feature as well. This session is being recorded, and you can enable captions by clicking the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen. It's my pleasure to introduce all of our speakers. The 3 sessions we have today, the first is Librarianship at the Crossroads, reflecting on the profession in the wake of the uproar created by generative AI. That's Melissa Lawson and Lisa Rogers from Utica University. Second will be Libraries and the Disruption of AI, Grounding in the Past to Inform the Future by Megan Press and James Henry Smith of Indiana University, Bloomington. And our third speaker is speaking on generative AI, literacy, license, and libraries. It's David Mercer from Fairfax County Public Library. I'm going to go ahead and turn over to our first speakers now.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Lawson, and my colleague Lisa Rogers and I are very excited to give you our presentation today. So we just want to kind of start off by explaining where we began with our process. So obviously, like a lot of people, ChatGPT's update in April of 2023 was where we even started to play around with AI, like the two of us and GAI, generative AI, didn't do much beforehand. So this surge not only saw a lot of news articles, but we saw a lot of universities and other places taking a stance, while ours was particularly silent. We also saw faculty just concerns on our shared listserv with us getting spammed articles saying the telltale sign of students using ChatGPT, how to help write their essays, just both negative and positive, just questions, concerns, and these what we're calling silos of conversations. So not really any particular cohesive place on campus, but individually.
And as many libraries did, they created LibGuides. So we went ahead and created a LibGuide and some additional resources. We went ahead and picked the brains of our student employees to get a sense of what they were doing and how they were using GAI. We went ahead and reached out to our faculty. Each of us is a liaison for certain areas. So we went ahead and had those conversations and tried to get involved in as many communication avenues as possible. Particularly when we started seeing the on the faculty listserv, and the librarians are part of that, so much negative connotation being used. And then we also went ahead and reached out to the provost, because we weren't seeing a campus-wide conversation. And we knew that all of the different parties on campus needed to be part of it. So one of the things that we did is when we reached out to the provost and we found out about other groups on campus taking steps, doing presentations, creating workshops, we went ahead and invited them to the conversation with the provost as well, at which point we got ourselves invited to participate in some of the workshops that were being offered to the students in the spring of 2024. And that gave us an opportunity to start broadening our reach on campus, but there were still lots of pretty significant silos.
And I think now where we're at is currently from our university, there is no stance. Just as a university, our academic standards committee does have a statement that they were workshopping in the fall and then announced in the spring. But a university as a whole, we don't have any guidelines or anything particular. So it is left up to the librarians a good portion of the time, as well as faculty, to address students' concerns. Again, now there's also no collaborative platform. So we're still happening in silos of conversation, and it is creating kind of just, again, more if things are happening, we're not knowing until last minute. So again, we have the LibGuide, and those stats have been pretty good for the spring. We soft launched it in the fall, and then in the spring hard launched it when we worked together with Student Success for the GAI workshops.
And then we started thinking more about, well, where is the librarian's role in this conversation? And one of the things that's been evident since the beginning of the profession to some extent, the adaptability of librarians. And within the library profession, we're kind of at a crossroads. There's room for everyone at every type of topic at the table. So one of the things that we have to remember is that as each new technology has come down the road, we've incorporated it and adapted it and looked to learn it, and then taught others how to use these tools. So we went from hard card catalogs to online catalogs. We've incorporated the World Wide Web and taught people how to navigate that. We've learned how to use and taught people how to use online databases, and now there's GAI. One of the things, though, that's really critical is that this has to be a conscious dialogue. I think being sort of left out of the conversation in some areas has created problems. We are at a point where we can offer a great deal to the conversation, and we sort of have to remember that it's up to us to make sure that we're present at the table. So we are working on that on our campus, but there's no clear guidelines and no particular organization, as Melissa had said before. There's no campus-wide platform for conversation, which is something that we have attempted to get going, and we're continuing to work at. The need for continuous learning is evident, and that is something that's common in the profession already. But one of these, with the speed with which the changes are happening, it's very evident that this has to be something that's built into our daily professional activities, I guess you would say. It needs to be encouraged from the administration, and oftentimes our professional development has been something that's done on our own time or on the side. And I think now is a point where this has to be built in, and it has to be part of our regular daily professional duties and responsibilities. And that leads me to the discussion of the profession in general and the education. How we are bringing new people into the profession, and what are our opportunities for our library schools to create better relationships and offer additional ongoing training and professional development for our alumni. This is an opportunity that schools should be taking advantage of. Clearly within the profession, the framework is something that we would look to see where does GAI fit. In our opinion, it clearly fits in scholarship as conversation, but I think that there needs to be maybe more obvious items built into the framework or into the way in which it is applied, so that the context is easy to point to, especially as we are trying to get a foothold in the conversations on our campuses and across our communities.
And so, of course, going into ethics, Lisa and I have been doing lots of research on this, and something, of course, we always want to acknowledge is diverse perspectives, not just in the library fields, public, private, but also academic institutions, businesses, and professional communities. How are these people using these tools? Why are they using it? What are they using it for? Are they creating things? Kind of what the purposes is, and also the benefits. So using our campus as an example, we see efficiency and productivity. So helping students as a sounding board, or helping them make an outline, enhance student success. So, hey, I have, classes at these times and work at these times. When can I study? When can I take a break? Creating that. And then also faculty teaching through new avenues. We have some faculty individually, independently, including ChatGPT into their syllabus and into their conversation of, we're going to be working on these assignments together and looking at what these tools are using. So that's something that we want to include.
One of the things that's really important, and this is something I've been seeing in all of the presentations I've attended at this conference, is it's not just about teaching another tool and how, but the why and the when. Do we use GAI? And clearly that's incorporated in the discussion of ethics and academic integrity. But this is something where the librarians can help faculty and students, just as we do with other instructional opportunities and moments. This is an opportunity for us to bring our perspective to the table and help integrate this into our academic conversations.
And of course, we want to talk about who's benefiting from it and who isn't. So obviously, I talked about before just our spectrum, but also things like disability and neurodivergency, also looking at people of color, LGBTQ, and other marginalized groups, being careful of the biases in the data and the staff running the data. Also, the lack of current data. So if something is built from 2021 beyond, that's 3 years of missing information, which is crucial. And also controlled data. The general we, so us, like, don't get a say in the data that's being used for these GAI tools, and understanding that that is a crucial part of what's going on behind the scenes as well.
One of the things that we also need to pay attention to is the sort of the changing narrative around the perceptions of these tools. Initially, everything was negative. It's going to affect all of academia, and it's affecting what students are doing. And that was the mindset of the faculty and many of the staff and the administration. But we have to remember, we have to take a step back and remember that there are positive things about this. As Melissa just said, there are ways in which to use the tool to benefit our productivity. And so again, we go back to the why and the how and the when, and that's got to be part of the conversation. The reality is there really are some bad actors who are using these tools in negative ways to try to get around the system. And we do need to have policies and procedures in place to address that. But at the same time, we can't say absolutely no to this tool. And one of the things that we also need to be careful of, and we're seeing this more and more, is products that are already out there that are being used pervasively on campus, now incorporating aspects of AI or generative AI into their tools. And so we don't even know when we're using some of these resources, and the negative components about this. We're calling it negative product marketing, but the reality is some of these tools and companies are marketing their tools to be the solution, the end all and be all of getting through your academic environment, but they're not necessarily working to our students' best interests. And so we do need to be careful about how those messages are being received.
And I think on our campus, a huge part of the conversation, we actually have seen this chart in our research, and this is an amazing tool. And it kind of goes over what we've seen in kind of a circle. So starting with the conversation being social justice and rights, and moving to individual needs, culture and identity, biases and that. And then finally, we're starting to see the conversation talk about environmental impacts. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that this is going to be this continuous circle going on, not just on our campus, but across. So obviously, what do we need? We really want to focus on collaboration for GEI advancement. And I think librarians' expertise is crucial to this response. So it's our expertise in information literacy. This is not different from us explaining how a database works or the language that it uses that we have to talk to in order to get an article we like, or how to figure out whether or not an article is scholarly, is like well thought through. So this is where we can start leading the conversation in our appropriate fields. Also going over campus-wide guidelines, stances from relevant parties, not just ASC, but the library, the university, and the curriculums as well, to advocate a community of learning for those people who don't get to be a part of the conversation. And just quickly going over challenges, obviously information and overload and burnout, making sure we're sharing the burden across with not just us, but other people in our parties. And then just really quick mentioning about misrepresenting a tech savvy generation. Even though this generation may have been born with an iPhone in their hands, they don't know anything about generative AI or how it works and runs. So we have to make sure that we are catching up with the information, we are telling them, and we have this conversation, because these things are happening so fast. So just wanted to say thank you. We have our resources here and then our information if you need to contact us further. And I would like to move it on to our next presenter.
All right. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. You ready, James Henry?
Yep.
Okay. I'm Megan Press. I'm the Teaching and Learning Engagement Librarian at Indiana University Bloomington. James Henry, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So I'm the information literacy librarian for online learning, also at Indiana University, and we work in the teaching and learning department at our main library.
And the title of our presentation is Libraries and the Disruption of AI, Grounding into the Past to Inform the Future.
All right, so I just want to get started by giving us a bit of a roadmap for the next 15 minutes and then discussing some of our learning outcomes. So we're going to be building a lot off of Lisa and Melissa's discussion about the role of librarians with student and faculty use of generative AI. We're going to get started by addressing this moment of transition and some of the affective responses to emergent and disruptive technologies. And then we're going to ground this discussion in an adjusted version of Ranganathan's 5 Laws of Library Science into this modern context. So just to kind of state a little bit more in depth what our positions are, we're both approaching this from a instruction in public services librarian standpoint. And so much of the discussion will be oriented towards that particular perspective, even though we recognize that folks in cataloging or more tech services have a different set of issues that they work with in dealing with generative AI and how it's just could be potentially disruptive of their current workflows. Also say that all of our examples are geared towards an academic context, but are highly translatable into a public and non-academic research and information need. So the reasoning that we started using Ranganathan's laws is just going back to that beginning part of our profession and how to incorporate these emerging technologies as they come in. So by the end of these next 12 minutes now, you'll be able to translate the initial laws of librarianship into this current context with the emergent technology. And you'll also recognize some ways to ground this work into your practice yourself.
So, like the previous presenters, we noticed are noticing that the general rhetoric around generative AI in higher education is really largely revolving around fear at this point and on our campus as well. Fear of plagiarism and cheating among students, fear of job replacement, fear of watering down information and resources and education as a whole. But as we've said, libraries have weathered many existentially challenging technology waves over the years, from computers to Wikipedia, and have found that technology may change, but the core values of librarianship really haven't. And so it is these core values set forth in the Ranganathan's 5 Laws of Library Science that we bring you today to kind of ground our practices as librarians, information professionals, and educators. You may find these talking points helpful in communicating with your libraries or with outside stakeholders when generative AI comes up in fearful tones. So we offer them today for your use. So traditionally, Ranganathan's 5 Laws of Library Science would say, books are for use, every reader their book, every book its reader, save the time of the reader, and the library is a growing organism. And so what we're going to do, over the years, this is like an early 1900s a foundational statement of values of library science. There's been a talk of replacing book with resource or tool as a word, and that works really well. And we're just going to take it one step further for the purposes of this conversation. And instead, we're gonna say resources are for use, There's a tool for everyone, every resource its user, save the time of the user, and the library is still a growing organism.
All right, so kind of making this transition from books are for use to information resources are for use. Much like that transition from closed stacks, books literally chained to the shelves, there had to be an adjustment to the workflows of librarians during that time where they had to create policies about circulation and instruct users on responsible use. This translates really quite well to generative AI. So we've noticed that blanket bans against using AI for student work just doesn't work. So instead, let's consider ways to think about guidelines for ethical use of the when, where, and how to use generative AI tools. So much of generative AI works by taking large data sets and summarizing and converging all of that information into more friendly, quick ways to work with this technology. And so it's helpful for summarizing and learning trends and patterns. And so that can give us ways that already been done. It's not quite that useful for divergent ways of innovative thinking. So that's one way to start thinking about the parameters of when and why and how to use this. I also want to consider some of the potential costs for using this at times that it wouldn't be the most useful. So there are financial costs for subscriptions to a lot of these tools. But we also want to consider some of the intellectual costs of sometimes doing that slow work of doing deep dives into really dense readings rather than just summarizing it really quickly can actually have a much bigger benefit than summarizing a bunch of different texts and getting a cursory view over things. Then we also want to consider the energetic costs. A lot of these large data and large language models use tremendous amount of energy in their storage and use in single prompts. And so informing our users that this is a cost that we don't see is a way to continue to have those conversations of being rather judicious of when we decide to use these types of tools.
So there is a tool for everyone. I think one of the things that can often get missed in this conversation is that generative AI is many things, not just one thing, right? It's not just ChatGPT. It encompasses a whole range of potential tools, some of which are more useful than others. There is a tool for everyone. So, for example, Research Rabbit, Semantic Scholar, even Google Scholar have aspects to them that are uniquely great at what they do. Our subscription databases do certain things and third-party services do others, and neither one of those things are objectively good nor bad, but simply subjectively better or worse for certain tasks. And it's the responsibility of information professionals to understand users, use cases, and available tools. So, for example, when comparing Google Scholar to other library databases, it's usually immediately clear to students and professionals alike that they have very different things that they can do and that they're good for. And once again, this makes neither of them objectively superior to the other, but subjectively superior based on use case and user needs. We need to think about what these things are good for and how to appropriately match the tool to the person and the task. And for that, just like in all things, it's important for us to have the understanding of what they do and what they're great at and what their shortcomings are, so that we can be that advisory, that compass that helps point people in the direction of where they're trying to go.
So the next one is every book its reader and every resource has its user. This is kind of the partner to the previous law. So much like in a classic reference interview, you wouldn't recommend the wheels on the bus for a mechanic to use, and you also wouldn't recommend a toddler read Chilton's car manuals. So along with that kind of analogy, many AI tools were built for specific users in mind, and being able to identify this helps us know which tools to recommend to whom or which tools to not recommend in specific settings. One great example of a tool being built for a specific population in use is goblin.tools, which was built for neurodivergence in mind. This tool can help break down projects into specific tasks and can also help revise language into different linguistic registers or more appropriate tones for specific uses. So this is, again, one of those times where having knowledge of what this tool actually is, who it's built for, and how it could help that population is one of the ways that we as librarians can match the tool to the user and the user to its tool.
So save the time of the user. Using the wrong tool for the right task wastes time. And technology allows us to chip away at some of the pedantic, repetitive, time-consuming tasks, and ultimately preserves our uniquely human ways of thinking, making decisions, synthesizing information, and taking creative risks. So one example of the wrong tool for the right task is using ChatGPT to write a research paper, kind of a waste of time, but potentially using Research Rabbit to create the foundation of that research paper saves time and preserves the cognitive load for the human in the machine to do what they do best, which is the synthesizing information and making decisions and taking those creative risks and putting things out there, rather than spending the time and energy in those pedantic, repetitive, and time-consuming tasks that can take away and lessen the impact of the human in the machine. You know, as an instruction type person, I spend a lot of time thinking about putting the hard in the correct place when I'm designing instruction, meaning I want to make sure that the folks I'm designing instruction for are reckoning with the problems I want them to consider and not getting bogged down and losing steam and sort of using up their cognitive and working memories on stuff that is just unnecessarily hard. So some of the ways I think about this is, sometimes it's the appropriate task to teach folks how to navigate to the databases and then through the databases. But sometimes what I really want them to do is think about analyzing the information they're finding. And I don't want the hard part to be them getting to the databases. So I might find a way to make that part easier so that they're spending time using their working memory, their cognitive load. We're putting that in the place where they can really reckon with the thing that I want them to think about and not get stuck behind the stuff that is sort of unnecessarily yucky for what I'm trying to do. In many ways, we need this pedantic everyday, the delegatable tasks out of our brains in order to create the time and space necessary for those uniquely human things, the thinking, the creating, and the synthesizing.
All right, and then finally, my favorite of these laws, because it holds true over time, the library is still a growing organism. Much like our previous presenters gestured to, we started with books and then moved on to databases on physical media such as CD-ROM, onto online databases, through Wikipedia, blogs, and social media, and now we've arrived to a time where generative artificial intelligence is creating some fears and some anxieties around the state of information literacy in our information landscapes. But it is our job as information professionals to keep up to date with the resources as they continue to develop, expand, and grow. And that is the beauty of our library ecosystem, is that we get to do that same expansion and growing with our libraries, our communities, and our profession at large.
So that's the end of what we wanted to share today. If you have questions or comments, you can hold them to the end of the block or use the Q&A feature in Zoom. We will pass on here to David.
Thank you, Megan. Title of my presentation is Generative AI, Literacy, License, and Libraries. Who am I? A veteran librarian and instructional librarian at Fairfax County Public Library. My core competencies include UX design, reference, finance, My core competencies include UX design, reference finance, and pedagogy. Thomas Watson, the former head of IBM, once said, "I'm no genius, I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots." But by and large, I'm no expert at AI, but I'm in the process of learning, so let me present my findings. AI literacy. Everyone should learn AI. What does it mean? First, we had digital literacy emerged, and you access basic computer-related concepts and skills with the advent of the PC. AI literacy, in contrast, refers to the ability to understand the basic techniques and concepts in AI between different products and services. You have a couple of different aspects of this. Coding framework, which is the knowledge and understanding. Basic functions, applying this knowledge to different scenarios. And then you also have the higher order thinking, evaluation, appraise, predict, and design with AI applications. And one particular area you want to be conscious of as you delve into generative AI are the human-centered considerations, in particular AI ethics. So what do we mean in terms of AI and intellectual property? Clearly, there's no one size fits all. And some of the best practices are you want to develop intellectual property and strategies and procedures, access whether inventions are patent eligible. So AI and libraries can help them automate, provide customization of services, and to the end user. One of my specialties, as I mentioned earlier, is UX. As with other technologies, with power comes great responsibility. As I think the previous presenter just explained, libraries, as we know, go far beyond housing books and quiet study spaces. As I said earlier, information discovery, classification materials. Another aspect we want to be mindful of is AI can be used to promote equity and inclusivity. And as a previous presenter once remarked, we want to address the biases in AI algorithms, in particular with respect to ethical and equitable promise to empower users. Again, privacy of the user is critical. With the integration of AI, libraries can improve UX, but at the same time, you want to keep the customer's information confidential. Off to the right is a good graphical display of the different aspects of artificial intelligence. As we mentioned earlier, they include analytical, functional, interactive, textual, and visual. Analytical includes new insights, patterns, and relationships in the data, and these help make data-driven decision-making. Functional, it exploits massive quantities of data patterns and dependencies. Interactive, it promotes automation, textual analytics, and natural processing, which library patrons can enjoy text recognition, some other aspects you can read. And visual AI is typical of recognizing, classifying, and sorting items, as well as converting images and videos into insights. Okay, so what are some of the potential library solutions of AI? As we just mentioned, cataloging AI, bibliographic descriptions, and RFID, classification, robotic AI classification resources will be easier to carry out without human error. Recommendation AI, circulation management AI. Referencing was something interesting that I ran across in the research. It talks about virtual assistants or chatbot, but it was curious. One of the graphical displays in one of the studies I read actually had robotics sitting at a reference desk. I thought that was maybe comical on one hand, but actually a little bit scary when you think about it. But I'm sure I just saw a talk by, not to get off topic, but Jacob Nielsen. I'm not sure if anyone knows who that is. He's a big user experience designer. He's very senior in the field. And he talked about the ways in which AI won't particularly, quote, replace jobs, but it will be as an adjunct to existing services. So when we talk about reference, I'm a reference librarian. And as I think we've mentioned in this conference, in addition to reference, but also circulation, other important positions in the library, AI will be used, at least at present time, to help people do their jobs better. So another aspect was discovery. And the last thing I'd like to mention is preservation, which includes machine language to determine what materials should be archived and which discarded. Prioritizing equity in AI can enhance the user experience and help us bridge the digital divide. And addressing bias is key, as I mentioned earlier, to empower library users. Wusu mentioned that ethical and equitable use creates library use that improves the user experience and provides equal access, fair outcomes, and unbiased services for all library users. So what's the implication for neurodiversity? While in the eyes of many, this uniqueness is sometimes seen as a negative in the eyes of neurotypicals. But as it was mentioned in one of the studies I read, the potential and power for AI innovation is very important. And as I mentioned earlier, I'd like to stress that it comes with great responsibilities. Also, another important aspect is the concept of neural networks. So again, when it comes to neurodiversity, neural networks, which are a network that AI used to mimic human brain operating data processing, can help enhance the neurodiverse do their important tasks and jobs, but it also can fill in it will add to the strengths, but also fill in for any weaknesses that the person may have or areas which may be more challenging. So when it comes to autism and ADHD, autistic and ADHD users can have problems on work if it does not interest them. And AI will help such users focus. Natural language processing, words can have different meanings among diverse users. And as I said, it serves as a cognitive supplement. UX librarians, which is one of the areas that I said I focused on, other technical library staff could create efficient workflows for neurodivergent users having difficulty working with working memory, comprehending complex language, and learning intricate details. A couple of the apps that I found particularly noteworthy were Motion. You can go to the link on that. Focuses on planning and scheduling the user's day, and Adaptive, which is product fruits is the product, covers library onboarding, can help users to track software usage, which would be helpful to librarians and information organizations. Last thing I like to mention is large language models, LLM, are training on massive amounts of data. They're accurate most of the time, but sometimes they hallucinate and give an inaccurate answer. So that's the presentation I have, and I'd like to have any questions or answers. I think I kind of raced through that, but
We do have a few minutes left. If anyone has any questions for David or our earlier speakers, now's the time. You can bring those questions forward. David, you had a question in the Q&A tool that says, any suggestions for how to best approach this massive change, which is always hard, and which AIs might I invest time in? Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll be ending this session here. There's one more session time left, starting at the top of the hour, and then we'll have our closing keynote at the end of the day. The recordings are being made and will be available shortly after the entire conference is finished. Thank you all and have a good day. Thanks to all of our presenters as well.
Thanks, Amy.